We can do whatever we want.
I feel like I want to go back and touch in a little bit about the difference between childhood friends, like differences and similarities, honestly, between
Just talking about making friends. Friends. Okay. We can talk about whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah, it's our podcast.
No, I guess I've been thinking a lot lately about friendships and how different they've been throughout my life. And how I feel like, honestly, I wasn't really given great tools around making good friend choices. And also, I wasn't really given any tools about being a good friend, I feel like.
Yeah.
Not like completely. Like I wasn't like devoid of
empathy.
Yeah. But I just am realizing, I think like in the last few years or whatever, I think that's like really what your 30s are all about now.
Yeah. Figuring out how to have
Your like
friends.
mid 20s to like early 30s is not even just figuring out how to be friends, but like you're figuring out yourself, really.
Yeah.
You're coming back to like all the shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're coming back to yourself after all the shit has like, you know,
settled a little from your 20s.
Right. Because I think that, I don't know. Okay, so something I'm like super fascinated about is like that period of time, especially for what seems to, I mean, it's for anyone, but like when you're like 16 and the teenage angst. Because I remember it being like really bad for me.
Really
like
palpable.
Yeah, like sleeping till 3 p.m. Although I think there's some of that is like just like developmental. I've like read because I've like read about this. I've read like studies on this. I'm like fascinated by it.
I mean, I remember teaching junior and seniors in like high school, and they could not stay awake.
Yeah.
And I remember,
you're exhausted.
And I remember having like, because I was a theater teacher, and I remember there was a few times I was just like, you guys can't even keep your eyes open. So I was like, why don't you just close your eyes? We're going to take a nap for like 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh, you're like the dream teacher.
Like, because you guys are like not going to get anything done.
I was a master of like propping my arm up and angling my face away from the teacher so I could take like micro naps during class. But that's like a period of time that is like noted to be just like you need so much more sleep.
Right.
One, because you're like physically growing at like a really rapid rate, but you're also experiencing a lot of like neurological development changes.
Yeah.
And I am like convinced, I have nothing, this one I don't have anything really to back this up with, but my theory is.
I feel it in my heart.
Yes. I really think that that's like a period where you're like exiting childhood. And you're realizing that you kind of want to fit in the world. And you're starting to have to like pick and choose things that represent who you are or how you want to be perceived.
Right.
And you're having to like let go of being playful or being childlike. Like I've told you about my friend Monica, where we were like so playful that like I remember thinking like the way that we play would be probably like kind of embarrassing if our friends in like high school found out because it was so childlike and like I don't know, we had like a whole imagination, like imaginary world.
Yeah.
So I really think that that period of time, one of the reasons it's so exhausting is because you're kind of like putting on masks and like trying on masks.
Experimenting with personality and
and like picking and choosing like how am I going to dress so that I can fit in with this like one particular group? How do I want to be perceived? And I don't think it's like conscious. I don't think you're like, how can I be fake? Like you're just like, you're really trying to fit
your tribe.
in.
You're trying to find your tribe, like your group of people that you feel safe and like you belong in. And I think, I don't know, thinking about that period of time, I do feel like for me, at least, there was a lot of disillusionment that was happening, like how magical I felt childhood was for me. And when that starts falling away, it's like a little bit of, I think, like a crisis of like realizing,
absolutely.
Oh
That's
my God.
That is
like,
what it is. It's a crisis.
Like reality is way different than I thought it was this whole time.
And you're like, I don't know that I want to be an adult.
Yeah.
That's how, it's funny because like my whole life I wanted to be an adult from the time I was young. I just would see like people making decisions for themselves, not being told what to do and having like autonomy. And that was like all I ever really wanted. At the same time, there was like another side of me that was like, this is intense.
Yeah.
Like you're not like as protected anymore. And you're like coming to terms with life. And I don't know. So during that time, like I feel like I did as best of a job as I could at like being a friend.
With what you had.
Yeah. And like picking friendships. But I don't think I like knew what I was doing, you know? And nobody was like telling me that's what was happening. The reason that this became really fascinating for me is because my little like sister, who's actually, she's a cousin, but she was brought into our family when she was like 6. So I like often call her my little sister. But there's a big age difference. I'm 34. She's like 21 right now. So when she was going through this period, I just remember like watching and observing her and being like, oh my gosh, this is such a thing.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, I don't know, there's something like girls are like not very nice at that age. Right. I think it's because they're all going through that same thing. And so they're like, I don't know, it's like a survival of the fittest or something. And they're like, everybody's like picking
establishing
on
a
each
pecking
other.
order.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like very primal and it's like origin. And also in the way that it like kind of just like, most people tell me they experienced this very similar like phenomenon. I don't know. And so just watching her, like I remember, I always joke with her. I'm like, man, you have like adult siblings who have just like given you cheat codes for life.
Right.
Like I'm like
up, down, down, left, right,
Yeah.
So let's start.
Yes. Sometimes I like, because I really feel like I was able to kind of help her with that part. Because I was like, this is something that is super natural. I feel like everyone pretty much goes through this process. Because it's also like, it's kind of depressing. There's like periods of just like
Isolation,
sadness and isolation.
Like, what are these fucking hormonal feelings I'm going through?
And that's probably part of it too.
Yeah.
And I just remember telling her, you know, one thing I wish someone told me is that it's okay to outgrow your friends. And that was like why I brought all of this into it. Because I think that that is an important thing that I wish someone told me.
It gave you permission.
And gave me permission. Yeah. I had to figure this all out on my own. And I don't think that I realized how important it was. But yeah, just the idea that I think it's okay to outgrow your friends. And I wish it was a conversation we had more often because we tend to think that like a friendship coming to an end or a natural end is a bad thing or somebody did something wrong or you fucked up or you were, I don't know. But why can't it just be that you like outgrew each other? I don't know. That's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, because it's almost like, especially when you're young or really at any point in time, because we are tribal, communal, like focused beings, that you do automatically, the people you're with, like that whole idea, you like the 5 people that you're closest to, they will have like the biggest effect on you.
Totally.
And you'll see them reflected in you and your behavior, your way of thinking. And so it's like when you are in friendships with people, they're affecting you and your sense of self. And if there's somebody that's not in alignment or you grew in different ways and you are forcing yourself to stay in that closeness, it's affecting you in a way that might not be like authentic or in alignment with you anymore.
Right. Because that's another thing that's like I've come to learn. And I think we all know on some level, but it's just like, it's not until some things are said like explicitly that it's like, yes. You know, when you read something, you're like, that's a truth. Like, I know that to be like true for me, but thank you for like writing that.
Yeah.
As you did. But personality is contextual. And the easiest way for us to like really see that is that like, I don't behave the same way in front of my parents that I would with you. I don't say everything that I'm thinking. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think that like growing and adult friendships is more about finding the people that you, I guess, just like, you don't have to like curb what you say as much. You're like more fully yourself and you are not having to just show up with different parts of yourself and you're able to be more entirely like you. And that is a process. And through that process, you're likely to outgrow friends. But I will say like another thing, gosh, I have so many thoughts on this. I can almost like not get them all out at once. I'm like,
Traffic jam.
I'm like frantic. But the other thing about that is something that happens, I think, in this process is because when we have friends that we've had for many years and we develop habits and patterns and ways of showing up and just dynamics, we forget that we can change them. And so something that has happened for me that I've realized is sometimes I'll think, okay, I think I'm outgrowing this friendship. But if I just bring up that I want a shift or a change and I like give them the opportunity to kind of like see what it is I'm seeing in our like dynamic that maybe is like not great for both of us, people are like super open to that. It's just not something I think a lot of us do. For example, I have a friend where we've talked about just being judgmental and how that makes me feel less likely to share openly because there was a younger, pettier version where we would make fun of people or like, you know what I mean? Like when we were younger, just being judgmental. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe those people just like post pictures of themselves on Instagram. Gross.
Sure.
Like they just went to do that one thing literally just to take pictures for Instagram. Gross.
Gross.
Like, yeah. Like,
yes.
But it's like when you do that, you're not hurting those people. You're just hurting yourself.
Right.
And so I had to like say, this is kind of like something I don't want to engage in anymore. And it was like a weird conversation, but it ended up being a really beautiful one.
See, this idea I really love because I really believe that the growing and the learning we do during our lives are from our relationships, right?
Yes, I completely agree.
And
this
so,
whole like, I'm sorry. I'm so like, I'm like
traffic jam.
But there's so many thoughts I'm having. Because that's the other thing is like, we love to, right now we're in this like individualistic, do the growth on your own by yourself. Don't be in a relationship, be alone, find all the things you need within yourself. And like, yes, to some degree, but I don't think you can do it as effectively on your own. You need the people.
Because you need that feedback. You need somebody to act like a mirror where either you're resonating with somebody like, yes, I feel that's true for me, or you're not. Like this judgmental aspect that we embodied, like as we were teenagers or whatever, no longer resonates for me. And you could have just been like, well, I'm done with this relationship and moved on. But what you did was you actually offered this friend an opportunity to grow with you by bringing that into the light.
It was really weird and uncomfortable. Yeah. Another one I did it with was around self-deprecating humor. I had a friend and I was like, yo, as a guy, I was like, I can't like get on this like self-deprecating train with you anymore to the degree that we do because I'm realizing it comes from like a really unhealthy place, like a place of like actual self-loathing. And so I just kind of can't do it anymore. And one thing that I've learned, and that actually a mentor really helped me with, is I always felt like when I had those conversations at first, again, this is like years ago, when I was first having these conversations, I was kind of like, I didn't know how to have them. And so I felt like I was messy as hell and like kind of almost like coming with my protectors out and like a wall up, afraid of what they were going to like say because it was like this really uncomfortable like shifting of dynamics. And the thing that I wish I had known back then that I was taught and has really helped me was just the concept of like, instead of imagining that conversation being like face to face, like imagine like coming and like sitting beside them. And like, that was like the image she painted for me. She was like, imagine instead of you're like face to face and you're ready
like
for battle.
Confrontation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, just sit next to them and like put your arm around them. And I was like, that's the image I try to paint for myself when I feel like I need to have conversations like that. Cause I don't know. It was just like, it's like difficult and weird and uncomfortable. And
No, what's interesting is I'm thinking, I don't feel like I have very much had those conversations
with people
and friendships. I feel like it's been pretty consistent that I just like let let the relationship go.
Yeah.
And
I have those too though.
What I'm realizing is like, I don't feel like I ever gave myself permission to be like, you can be not okay with a certain aspect of a relationship and actually bring it up to somebody with like vulnerability. I would just fade away.
Yeah.
Which is kind of my MO.
I mean, I've done that too.
Yeah.
I've done that too because it is hard and it is uncomfortable.
And also I think, and this probably would be reflecting, and this is my like 20-year-old self, 25-year-old self, probably with like a lower sense of self-worth and probably projecting that onto friendships and believing that people don't value their friend, like the friendship with me.
Right.
And so why would they want to listen to anything that I might have to say? And I did for most of my life, I feel like I protected myself in friendships in a really big way. And I think part of me felt like I was protecting the other person from me, from my,
for sure. I relate to that
sadness,
so much.
from my whatever. But that ultimately doesn't create an actual intimate connection because I was like withholding myself in a big way. And actually my friendship with you has been like the hugest lesson in that because I remember early on I was in that early on in our friendship, I felt like I kind of still was participating in that. And I was like withholding parts of myself because not only because I didn't accept them myself, but I think I was just genuinely afraid of being messy. You know what I mean? And I didn't know if I would be loved through that. And I can't remember if it was like a specific conversation that we had or something, but you said something like, I really wish I could hold space for you.
Yeah,
like,
the
I
way
really
you do
wish
it for me.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, I had this like moment of clarity around how good it feels, how like actually incredibly loving it feels when I get to hold space for you if you're sad or upset or angry or confused. And
it's like your superpower. And then you like wouldn't do it for me. And I was
wouldn't
like,
let you experience the same thing. And you were just, and I would realize like, oh my gosh, I'm literally denying Sarah of this like beautiful, intimate experience because I'm unwilling to be messy.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. I know. I was just thinking that because I remember saying that to you a few times.
Yeah, it took a minute. Yeah.
Where you, and then because sometimes even when you would try to do it, it was actually like really surprising to me because you're so incredible at holding space for me when I was like an actual like disaster. Like there were like times where I was a complete shit show and just such a mess in front of you. And honestly, I don't think that I've done that with very many people. So like you cultivated a space where I felt comfortable doing that and then you wouldn't do it yourself.
Right.
And I remember actually I remember thinking, am I not creating the same like space for her where she feels comfortable doing that? And that like made me bummed.
Right.
Because that's actually something that I've like worked on where I've been told again, like a long time ago, like 10 years ago more, that people thought that I was like super confident and like unapproachable. And I was like, what?
You
I am
bananas.
a disaster. Like, and so I actually have had like affirmations in my morning routine around like, I am present and I make people feel heard and respected and loved. And I feel like a safe place for them to like share vulnerable sides of themselves. And so I have seen that like transformation in me to where people went from saying like, oh, you seem confident and unapproachable to like all of a sudden people were like opening up almost to a point where it was like, whoa, okay.
All
like,
right.
I don't know that I want to be like the safest place for actually everyone. Because here I am in like this really uncomfortable situation now. But I remember wondering like how much of that was you and how much of that was me.
Yeah.
And so I just decided to call it out and say, hey, I want to like be that person for you too.
Yeah.
Because it really surprised me. And then you started doing it. And I'm so proud of you.
It was so uncomfortable. I was
you would like say sorry. You were like, I'm sorry.
Like I'd say,
are you joking?
I was yeah. It was so uncomfortable for me to be messy. And I think, I mean, this was just like a lifetime building up of trying to be what I thought was like the best version of myself, which wasn't actually the authentic version of myself. It was just like this shell of that I was never going to require stuff from anybody. I don't know.
Yeah.
I totally was like a protective mechanism as well, I think.
Well, it's making yourself small.
Yeah. And I really just like not believing anybody gave a shit enough. And it wasn't like anybody in particular. I think it was just my opinion of myself.
Totally.
And the low self-worth that I felt there. But then I remember like starting to practice being vulnerable with you and feeling that dynamic shift was just like completely redefined, like how I want my relationship, all my relationships to be, you know? And I want that give and take where both people are able to be vulnerable and hold space. And like, I mean, you have to have that in your romantic relationships. Like, and I think it's really important in your platonic friendships or whatever. Not that I would say ours is a platonic friendship because I am in love with you madly.
Yeah, it's so true. Because I remember just so much of my life. I don't know. I feel like we all have experienced this to some degree where you feel like you have a one-sided friendship.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's experienced what that feels like. And I've just decided to try really hard not to have those anymore. I don't know. But also I think it's important to try and give the other person a chance to not assume that it's like, it's funny because even just talking about family dynamics with Ben, where I'm like, what if you just like shook things up with your family and just like, I don't know, started hugging them being like, I love you.
Yeah.
And
he's like, some like emojis in your text messages.
And he's like, whoa. I'm like, I mean,
why not?
You might come to find that your whole family is like,
has been craving
that and waiting for it and had no idea until it just started happening. I'm like, but that's like what we have to remind ourselves to do with friendships, I think, is like, I don't know. There's a big conversation in like the world of self-development right now where like, yes, you can outgrow friendships and people will maybe not like be good for you anymore, but there's kind of like a fuck you attitude to it sometimes. Like, haven't you seen that where it's like, you're toxic and I'm not, and I'm outgrowing you and peace. And I'm like, to me, that just doesn't seem like the way to do it.
That's
like,
skipping steps.
Well, and also it's saying that
I'm better than you.
It's saying I think I'm better than you.
And that component.
And that you don't have the capacity to grow like I do.
See,
like that's such a like, what?
That's like really limiting. And the conversations and stuff that you would have, like actually giving the relationship an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Just to be like, hey, I see this whole area we can grow or shift. And like, do you want to with me? If not, that's cool. Like if you're not ready for that, and then you move on. You know what I mean? But like, I would wager most people were open to that and probably were wanting it themselves and didn't know how to
ask for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's super awkward and messy. Like all those conversations, thinking back on them, like make me cringe a little. Like I'm not saying it like feels great.
It's like your favorite thing.
No, it's not my favorite thing. And like, I think most of them I like burst into tears like as I was talking just because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is so weird. But I remember you were recently telling me about the conversation we had when I went to rehab and how I thought our friendship was like over.
And I did too. Like because I think we both felt
I went to rehab. You felt like you had no idea that was coming. Right. I felt like it needed to happen.
Right.
So you felt blindsided, right? And then I was in such a place of like just self-loathing. Yeah. Not even like low self-worth, like actual self-loathing.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember this. Like you should tell it because I don't remember it.
This is such a defining moment in like my entire life because I'd never experienced anything like this in a relationship. Yeah. And that time there were so many things going because my mom had just died. I was in major protective mode. You were going through all sorts of stuff like in your relationship and in your personal life. And then I got to go to rehab. I got to get like, I got to figure this shit out.
My life right now or like, it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember you asked me to go to breakfast and you're like, tomorrow I'm leaving for California. I'm going to rehab. And I like sucked right inside myself.
I remember that.
And I think that there was part of me that was like totally heartbroken, you know? Oh, it's going to make me like cry a little bit. Wait.
It's okay.
Because at that point, I'd never had a friendship like even like what we had, even as protective as I was and stuff. It was still like the most incredible friendship I had at that point. We're just like both crying at each other.
But you're talking, so they can't tell I'm crying.
But she's crying too. I'm not the only one crying. Yeah, I remember I just like sucked inside myself and you left and I thought it was done. Like I thought it was over and I thought I had to just like let you go. And then I remember exactly where I was in the River Arts District in Asheville. Like I had to pull over. I was driving and I had to pull over because I started crying. And you called me and you were just like, no, I'm not letting like our friendship fade away. It might almost have been months later.
I think it was weeks, like definitely.
It was like time had passed enough for us to like, we weren't really even texting very much. And you called me and you were just like, your friendship means so much to me and I am not going to let us just like fade away from each other. And I just had never in my life had somebody like care about me and like a friendship with me to like fight for it, you know, to say, no, I'm unwilling. Like, I'm going to fight for this. And it just, I was like, oh my God. And then it made me feel like I could fight for it too. Like I could show up in this friendship and everything fucking shifted then. And you were in rehab and I was back in Asheville and our like relationship just exploded. I feel like after that. And we had this trust and belief in each other and in our friendship, you know, and it was so incredible. And I'd never, ever experienced anything like that, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because you told me that story like a few days ago. And I actually like, I remember the conversation, but I don't remember like what I said. Because what I remember, and like I'm really, you know, in the last few months, so I have like strong protectors that come out very fiercely. And I'm like some context.
Will punch.
I think that I have a part of me that is just like incredibly protective of myself that will like act on my behalf when I'm like not fully present or like there or willing or even like able to take care of myself. And it's a part of me that's like, it's definitely like tied to anger, like this part of me. And so it's a part of me I haven't like fully appreciated until recently, right? Because I keep hearing these stories, like you tell me a story and I'm like, how do I not remember this? Like I don't remember it. But I think the reason I don't remember it, I remember the conversation was because what I remember in that conversation was self-loathing, deep uncertainty, not knowing what you would say, being terrified. I actually remember like trembling. You know what I mean? So it's like this like little voice in me or something that's just like, it gets big even when I like feel small, I think. So I think that's why I don't like remember that conversation, because I remember just like terror. I don't remember showing up the way that you are describing. Like, I'm like, who is that? Because that's not how I felt at the time. I felt like, I just felt like ready to be rejected and like, this is my last chance. I'm going to do it anyway. And I understand why she wouldn't want to be my friend. Like here I am in rehab. Who would want to be friends with somebody like me? I'm like trash. Like I'm an actual like worthless human being. And I really wish I could just like disappear without like hurting my family. That was where I was. So I don't know, like I'm very like happy that happened.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just some like deep intuitive, not as much of a conscious thing that was just like, I mean, I think that you were like, you're like my person, like you're like a person that needs to be my, and I want that. And I'm going to just like say things.
Like everything you're saying is true. You know what I mean? It's like truth, but like, it's just not what I remember.
That's not how you felt.
That's not how I felt. Like, I don't know. So it's just interesting to hear a story where I feel like I came across so differently from how I felt. I mean, I did feel those things as well, but I was overwhelmed by self-loathing.
Right.
And also like, I didn't know what you would say.
Right.
I was like expecting you to be like, I think I'm good. You're like too messy. But thanks.
And like, I can't even begin to tell you how I have not had like a single shred of that ever in our friendship. But like, I was so sucked into myself that I couldn't even, because I got scared and sucked in to the point where I wasn't actually even really witnessing you in your pain very well at all.
I will say that I agree with you on that one. I felt 100%. Like you were like, that's really painful. And I'm going to hide from you for a second.
I totally did.
To me, made sense. Like I was like, that makes sense.
But it wasn't.
Why would anyone want to be around me?
Right. And that's the interesting thing, because it wasn't because of that. It was because I was sad. I felt like I was losing you. And so I hid. So
fetal position, Emily.
I fetal positioned. So we do have this really, as far as like friendships go, I know so many people who have like witnessed our friendship, whether it be like partners or other friends or whatever. Like I have heard this constant feedback around, oh my God, I want a friendship like that. Or I'm so grateful for your friendship with Sarah, or I'm whatever.
Yeah, everyone in our life and like our lives who, I don't know, I guess like partners and stuff and like other close friends are like, I'm so glad you have Emily. Ben the other day goes, Emily is a treasure. And then when I reminded him he said that, he was like, treasure? I said treasure? I was like, that doesn't sound like a word I would say. And I was like, I know. That's why it's like so funny to me.
It's a word I would say.
But you are a treasure.
But and I think, I don't know, I think it just all goes in this kind of theme that we're exploring of making friendships as an adult. And how still very childlike it is.
Oh, totally.
Even though we're in our 30s, it is this, because you're vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable and open. And to actually have a satisfying relationship with another person, you have to show up as an authentic version of yourself.
Totally.
And like, we all know what it feels like when you're showing up as part of you. And it's like, can be okay to an extent, but then you start feeling like a deep sense of dissatisfaction because you're constantly having to filter yourself, you know?
Totally. And I think that something that comes up for me when you say that is like, I do have some friends where I feel like I can fully be myself in front of them. And what that's looked like for me is I've had to come to terms with, because obviously I think what happens there is you tend to have lots of moments that are just stressful or uncomfortable or triggering, or I don't know. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but we all know what that feels like when you have that friend where you're like, I gotta call this person. I do love them on some level, but also like it's tense because I can't fully be myself and I have to like feel like I'm managing the situation a little bit more to like maybe tiptoe around what I know are their insecurities. And I have one friend in particular that comes to mind where I just like made the decision. I was like, I want to be friends with him. I love him. I think he's like a beautiful person. He's also a very difficult person to be friends with. And so the way I became able to be like a better friend to them was I thought to myself, you know, I need to see them like as they are. I even like wrote out like describing this person, right? Because I realized like a lot of the frustrations and difficulties I was experiencing was me wanting them to behave a different way.
Right.
And being like, why can't you be more like open-minded? Why can't you be more chill? Why can't you be like, why does everything have to be so like big and loud and like, and then I was like, that's on me. You know, if I keep showing up in this friendship and don't accept them as they are and continue to get frustrated and mad when they are themselves, that's on me. And so it's my decision. Do I want to continue being friends with this person? I think it's okay if I had decided not to, but I like love them and I decided I wanted to be. But I like remember the moment in time when I was like, I need to start practicing seeing them as they are, accepting them as they are. And anytime I get frustrated for them just showing up as they are and me wishing that there's something like happening that's different, that's on me. Like that is my responsibility. And I need to do the work around that. And it actually ended up being like one of the best practices I've ever like implemented. And it feels good. Like I felt like I grew a lot from that like whole experience.
That is, I cannot even begin to describe to you like how emotionally aware and brilliant you are in doing that. Like you stop that. But no, for real. Like I don't know if I've ever consciously like gone through that loop like that, maybe.
Like that choice.
Yeah, like you speak about it with such clarity and it's really incredible. And I think it just makes me think of like how many relationships do I actively have where I am putting expectations on people to behave a certain way, whether it comes from a place of like believing they're capable of something bigger or whatever. But where am I not actually seeing this person as they are? And where do I need? And you know what? This is interesting because I do remember when I first started workshopping that idea of like radical acceptance, right? I would like to hear maybe your thoughts on this, but I feel like I took it so far, this idea of radical acceptance, that I abandoned any of my needs or desires for like boundaries or actually even seeing like what is good for me or not good for me in relationships.
Do you have an example?
I think it manifested in my inability to be vulnerable because I was just like, I'm just going to accept this person where they are and I'm not going to shake it up. Like I'm not going to, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So I think what you're saying is that you decided that radical acceptance was the way to be a good friend. But what it did was it prevented you from like getting your own needs met and like speaking up for yourself. So, I mean, even with me, like I could be that example, like in the earlier part. And so you were like, I'm radically accepting, I'm holding space for people, I'm being a good friend, but I'm not like asking anything of them.
Yeah. That is what I did. And I think it was, I was like workshopping the idea of acceptance, but I think it was also like a self-protective mechanism and like an avoidance of feeling vulnerable. And all those things, like so much about our relationship dynamics are just dynamics that are playing out in your own relationship with yourself.
Totally.
Right. And so I think like all of that was manifesting outside of me in my relationships, the truth that I had a lack of acceptance for my own messiness.
Right.
Right. And so I couldn't share that with anybody because I didn't accept that in myself.
Right.
You know?
Which is so wild to me because you were so accepting of other people's mess.
Right.
Is it like a savior complex?
Oh, 100%. Are you kidding me? That's like my MO, man.
You're like, I will save all the people while like actually like bleeding out.
I wanted to be Jesus. It was like my goal. Okay.
That is what it is. It probably comes from like your really religious upbringing. That, like, and like maybe did you think that that's what you had to do to be loved?
Absolutely. Like self-sacrifice.
Like you're all just like, I mean, we joked about this recently where I was like, you're like a rug sometimes. You're like, let me lay down on the floor and you can just like use me as a rug. I'm going to lay here.
Yeah.
I'm like, stop it.
And it's a really like fucked up roundabout way to feel valued.
Yeah.
You know, that like I was run over by a train, but hey, they wanted to run me over. I must be kind of valuable. It's really fucked up. But yeah, and I think like it's been this whole exercise in learning to value my own human experience and my messiness, and that being okay, and it being okay for me, and me not being afraid of that, and feeling like I can share that and still be loved and held. And for all this to come out, all of this learning, all of this like awareness and insight it goes back to my earlier point of like how relationships that's how we grow. Like that's really how we grow. Yeah.
Because that's the thing is like you can do all the work you want on your own, but you're not able to see your own blind spots. And that's what relationships do. They like drag out things that you just would not otherwise see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think there's so much overemphasis on figuring things out on your own. And like, yes, you should be able to be alone for a little bit. But I definitely agree with that. But I just don't think that's where like most growth happens.
Yeah.
And I just also, again, we kind of touched on this, but I want to like touch on it again briefly, is just this like spiritual self-development, personal development, self-growth, self-awareness movement. I see so many people moving to a place where like now I'm better than and like I'm woke, which is like the grossest word to me. I'm like woke and I want to have like woke friends. Sure. Those are the people I want to engage with. And it's just like, it's so gross.
It's just replaying your petty like teenage like it's like dynamic.
It's just a new same flavor,
new wording.
Like, of the same like judgment, dysfunctional shit.
Pecking order shit.
It is. Yeah. It's like the high school drama, but like I don't know, with a 2021 like spin on it.
Yeah.
It's like so gross to me.
Yeah. So something that I was kind of like thinking on this whole time is how you were talking about when you were little, how you wasn't ever taught the tools for friendship, which is like a really interesting thought to me because it made me think about like my girls and like what I'm teaching them. Like, what am I teaching them about friendship? And what came to mind was the thing that I have been consistently teaching my girls about friendship is for them to be aware of how they feel in the friendship. Because there's been so many times that my girls have been engaging in a friendship and I would look at them and I would be like, they look really stressed. Like they look just like anxious and stressed out. And I remember like having a conversation with Evie, my 9-year-old, and I was like, do you feel good? Like it was after this like big sleepover she had with a friend. I was like, you seem like really exhausted to me and stressed. Like, did you feel good during that sleepover? And she was kind of like, I don't know. I think I am kind of stressed. And it cracked open this whole thing. I was like, you don't have to be friends with somebody just because they want to be friends with you. If you're feeling like stressed and awful, like, is that the kind of friendship you want to nurture? I was like, it's really, especially when you're little, where they're just like picking friends, right? They're choosing friends from their little group of like schoolmates, you know? And like communicating to them that the friends you want to make are the ones you feel like safe and comfortable and seen, and that you don't have to like work so hard to pretend something else. And that for my little like 7 and 9-year-olds, like they had this like relief around that idea.
Yeah.
And now they have this like languaging around like this friend I feel really comfortable with and good with. And then I'm like, heck yeah, let's do play dates. Let's have them over. Like, let's lean into those friendships, you know? And I think it's been really cool for them to get to just understand how they're feeling in relationship. Like I didn't understand how I was feeling in relationships until I was like well into my 20s, like before I was really consciously reflecting on that stuff. And my kids are getting this opportunity to be touching in with their sense of self now. And there's something really healing about getting to teach them in that way.
You know, I can't wait.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah.
I'm like, that's like, I don't know. I'm like looking forward to that. That reminds me of something that also I've been thinking a lot about and we don't talk enough about is just the simple idea that like, everyone isn't like for you.
Yeah.
It's just okay.
You don't have to be best friends with everyone.
I don't know, like there's always going to be people that just like rub you wrong and you just are not like meant to be best friends. And it's like totally okay.
Yeah.
And also like not everyone's going to like you. Like,
yeah. What is that quote that like you could be the juiciest peach in the world, but there's still going to be people who don't like peaches.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard that. It's so true. It's interesting because we were talking about rejection last night. Like, it still feels like a form of rejection. Like, because we've all experienced someone that we don't really like. And we're like, we're not meant to be friends. But if they feel the same way about you, you're like, well, fuck you. I'm cool.
Wait,
you don't want to be friends with me?
You're not allowed to reject me. I reject you.
And I know that when I was younger, I would be like, no. And like maybe even like bring them closer so that I could be the one that rejected them. Like in a very childish way.
Right.
Which is so gross.
Gross.
But it's like not even just with people. I think this is something like the whole world needs to remember right now is like everything isn't for you.
Hey, world, remember this right now.
Because we're all so like upset and angry all the time at other people's like opinions and viewpoints. And we're all like frustrated and angry. And I'm just like, it's not all for you. So when you open an Instagram account and it triggers the fuck out of you, that Instagram account is not for you. That person is not your person. Like, it's okay. It's okay, everyone. Like, we don't need to like get along with, and I don't know. The more I've reminded myself of that, the like easier life has gotten. Like, I will see something that I'm like, gross. And I'm like, you know what? That's just not for me.
Yeah.
I say that all the time to myself. I'm like, that's just not for me. That person's not for me. That thought process is not for me. That opinion is not for me. It's okay. That's
I really,
not for me.
really like that so much. It's such a gentle way to do that instead of being like, fuck that, fuck these people. Like, just to be like, this isn't my thing. That's not for me. It's actually like, that's how I go clothes shopping with my girls because they're so afraid of, they don't want to like make me sad that they don't like the shirt that I picked out for them or whatever.
Gosh, yeah.
They're like, Mom, we don't want to hurt your feelings. I was like, okay, first of all, do I come across that fragile? Maybe I need to work on that. Second, I was just like, it's not going to hurt my feelings because what would make me the most happy is for you to choose things that you really love. And so I just taught them to say that, like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And they would be like, thanks, Mom. It's not for me. And I would be like, okay, and put it back and like, you know, it's so funny, but like, it's such a gentle, like loving way to move through things, you know? But it's also this whole thought of like, so would you say then that we kind of subconsciously tie our sense of self-worth to how we view we are being accepted?
Yeah.
And so when
it's like our identity, and it's like how we're being accepted is also like how we identify. Like when people are like, "Who are you? What do you do?" and you're like, you have your things that you list off to like describe yourself in under 30 seconds, which is like a joke,
right? Remember, we're gonna get back into just saying our favorite color, favorite animal.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. What is your favorite animal though?
I don't know. A dog or a fox?
A dog or a fox? A fox dog?
A fox dog.
Mine is horses. Always has been. Always horses. Will be. Followed closely by like maybe pandas. I don't know.
Oh, pandas.
But yeah. So you're saying listing all the things that like your 30-second rundown of like who you are and this whole idea of like acceptance equals self-worth.
Yeah.
But how that doesn't fit because you're not going to vibe and connect with every single person, every single idea, every single thing. And so it's almost like we've got to separate that a little bit, right? Like our sense of self-worth is intact and doesn't have to be measured up against every single person and thing that you like come across.
Well, also this all reminds me of the idea and the concept where people are like, when you're triggered by someone, it's really a reflection of you. And like, yes, I would say that's probably mostly true. However, there are some people that trigger you because you're like, ew, gross.
This
I want
not
nothing to do with
me.
that. Like, it's not one or the other. And that's something that like, I don't know, that kind of fucked with me a little bit. When I first heard that, I was like, okay. I started like looking at all the things that triggered me, and I learned a lot by doing that. Because I think it's important. If you get triggered, ask yourself the question, what is this triggering to me? What is happening here?
Yeah.
And like, you'll probably learn so much more about yourself in such a quick amount of time when you do that. But in doing that, I was like, wait a second, to say that that's always the case is not true. Sometimes people trigger me because I'm like, gross. I want nothing to do with like what you're about.
Yeah.
Sometimes because it's wrong.
Sure.
Like, I'm like,
not in alignment.
You're like, and obviously that person's not for me. That's not for me.
Not for you. And I think that's such a good point because there is, I feel like at any given moment in any relationship, you have opportunity for self-reflection, right? Like, what is this saying about me or hitting in me, or where is it in alignment or out of alignment? And that can be happening. I feel like it can be happening and that person cannot be for you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
Totally.
there's just so many layers of being able to like explore and learn about yourself.
And there's different combinations. Like some people will be triggering. You'll ask yourself the right questions. You'll learn a lot. But also you'll be like, this person's not for me.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that because you can be consciously aware of why this situation is triggering you that you need to be in a relationship with this person or connected to this person.
Yeah.
And I think that there's even just like a simple, like people who are fully participating usually subconsciously in just like negative feedback loops. Like it's just all this cycle of like perpetuating pain and negativity. Like
it's
that
hard
is like,
to witness now. Because sometimes when you engage with people, when you've been doing this work, and I'm really not trying to sound like one of those crazy woke people who thinks I'm better than everyone.
Sarah's not woke, okay?
I'm not woke. I'm just fucking trying to figure it out. But I'm like noticing all the judgments. I'm like I called those woke people crazy. That was so rude.
Rude.
I'm like so caught up in all the things I said.
We're
that was
just
gross.
Figuring it out.
But no, when you see that in someone, I actually feel like a lot of empathy for them and like sadness sometimes when they're like, I'm like, oh man, you're like so. And something I've noticed about people is that when you get to know someone more, you start to really realize, oh, okay. And so that was not a good example.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
but yes.
I'm realizing that by the look on your face.
Yeah.
So, okay, an example of this is one of my favorite stories that I've ever been told was one of my partner's moms told me this story about how her friend had a son who was deaf. And he wanted to learn how to ski. He was like a teenager. And so he was trying to ski, but he couldn't hear people behind him on the slopes. And so he was like getting in people's way and people were really angry with him because they were like, what the fuck, dude? Like, get out of the way. Even though it is definitely like the person's responsibility who's coming up from behind someone to like, anyway, it was causing him a lot of like, it was like really upsetting because it was like people don't understand. So she made him like a shirt that said like I'm deaf. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he wore this shirt, because he was young, I think maybe not even a teenager, people were like suddenly just so encouraging and like, yeah, dude, like you're doing it, and like trying to engage with him and like be more patient and empathetic. Wow. And so like for me, it's just this like beautiful image of when we know people's stories and struggles, our empathy and compassion for them like immediately grows.
Right.
Like we all know someone where we're like, that person's crazy and difficult. What the fuck? And then you hear about their like childhood and you're like, oh my gosh.
It just cracks you up.
You're just like, I so understand you more. Yeah. And so I just try to remind myself of the deaf shirt. Like if we all walked around with our little shirts on that had on the back
pain.
That was like, I'm going through a divorce. My family rejected me because I came out. Like you would be.
Oh, that gave me like chills.
Yeah, we would go around with so much more empathy and compassion. And so I actually remind myself of the like shirt.
Yeah.
When I'm experiencing a difficult person, because I'm like,
there's so much I don't know.
There's so much I don't know about you. And I'm sure if I knew about your childhood or whatever it is you're going through right now, that I would not be as like frustrated with you. I do not do this all the time. Sometimes I'm like, fuck you. But it's like one of the best examples. It's just like a quick and easy, like what would be on the back of this person's shirt.
Ugh, I fucking love that. I've never heard that story.
It's in my book that you were supposed to read.
I read some of it. Sorry.
It's okay. It was word vomit. It was terrible. I was like, I'm so sorry.
Because I feel like I've seen like memes or what little inspirational memes. What are those?
If you knew what people were coming
Yeah, like the iceberg thing. Like the tip of the iceberg is what you can see or know about somebody, and all this under the surface that you don't know. And there's so much there to like have compassion about. And yeah, how do we train ourselves to have that be like the default setting, like and be operating in that?
One of the quotes I do love was like, love difficult people because like you're one yourself. That was a good one because I'm always like, I don't know. Just like if I'm frustrated with Ben, I'm like, ugh, you're being so difficult. Like that like reminds me, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty difficult too.
Yeah.
This is truth. I am a difficult person. I mean, I just think that it's all about just trying to do the best that you can.
And with what you have.
And really, I want to bring it back to like being okay when you outgrow people, but also like not doing it from a place of being better than, because that's gross and not helpful. And that's one of the reasons I love the movie La La Land so much. It's a romantic relationship.
I fucking loved
but
how
when
it ended.
I was like, my mind. I was like, thank you.
Yes.
Romantic relationships can end without complete catastrophe, and we can have appreciation for the growth that they gave us. Why is this such a unique ending to a story?
And it was so interesting how many people hated the ending.
They did?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, how?
They like hated it because it was so triggering, I think, for them, probably subconsciously, this idea of relationships ending like that, because probably they have a belief that it's bad.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't. I'm unaware of that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Wait, people hated that ending? I actually like said out loud when it was over the first time I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh. Yes.
Thank you.
There needs to be more of this.
Yeah.
Because that's been my experience. Like my relationships, like I've had some like pretty long-term relationships. And I'm like, the amount of growth I've experienced in those is so important. And I would never, they had to happen.
Yeah. It's kind of this whole like Disney happily ever after complex that's just not the case anymore. Like,
and then all the other examples we have for relationships ending are horrific.
Right.
That's like the only two options.
Right.
You're together forever, or you hate each other and like drag each other down when you're breaking up.
Fuck. Yeah.
It's awful. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not real life.
No. Yeah. And when you think back on like the pioneer days when your relationships did need to last forever because that's how you survived, like we're not in that same, like we can experience the ebb and flow of relationships today. And like, what does that look like for relationships to begin and end with compassion?
Wait, I need to talk to someone who hated the ending of La La Land.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, wait, people hated it?
Wait, what?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm like still hung up on that.
That's funny. No, yeah. So, okay, my thought that I feel like we should touch on a little bit is like, as an adult.
Yes. Making friends?
Making friends.
I was just going to bring that up next.
And like how
do you do it?
How still very childlike it feels. And I think it's like when you make this assumption of other people that they have their shit together and that they're like, or maybe they don't need any friends. Like I feel that about like this adult isn't going to like want to be friends. Why would they? They probably have so many other friends. And what I have found is that they're all just as hungry for friendships as I am.
It's so true. It's so true. That's exactly what I wanted to kind of like wrap all this up with is that as I have gotten older and pushed through the like weirdness of that and just started like when I see people, that's how we became friends. I was like, this girl looks cool. I would like to be her friend. And then like reached out to you. And then with other friendships, like I have actually gone up to people, and it's only in the last few years that I've had like, I think the confidence to do this, but that's like how I've made some of my friends here is I've been just been like, I think we would be friends. Yeah. Do you want to like grab a coffee?
I love that.
And it's every time the reaction has been like, oh, like flattered almost.
Yeah.
Because I would be flattered if someone said that to me. I would be like, oh, you like see something you like in me? That's so fun. Because that's what you're saying to them. You're like, something about you is like awesome. Like, I want to like be close to
that. Yeah, I want to like see that. And I think that that's so beautiful. Is it your sister that does the whole like walks up to people and is like, let's be friends? I can't remember who was telling me that story. I felt like it was your sister.
Was it? I don't know.
And I just love how childlike that feels and like really authentic and pure. And it's really beautiful. And I feel like I was thrown kind of like headlong into this whole figure out how to make adult friendships when my like kids started going to school. Right. And then I was like with all these parents and I'm like, I need to like figure out how to make friends with people again. And I had so much social anxiety. Like every time I had to go to some little like kid event at school and I had to like talk to all these other adults.
That's super common. I've had every friend of mine and my sister who has kids all talk about the social anxiety of like having to like engage with all these parents.
Yeah. And then what I started doing is I just started talking about how anxious I was with the other parents. And everybody was like, oh yeah, me too. I'm like, I have so much social anxiety right now, like about this. And all of them were like, yeah, same. And so then I was like kind of able to like bust through some stuff. This is so awkward. Like that's a really
good thing to just kind of
just say it what it is.
Out, like what you're actually experiencing is such a good icebreaker because you feel seen and you feel like you're just being honest and vulnerable, and then the other people around you are like, yeah, me too, this is so awkward.
Yes. And then I feel like I did find like those few people that I was like, hey, I want to know you, you know, like you're so interesting and intriguing and whatever. And I have built like some awesome friendships. Even very recently, like I connected with one of the moms and like I've kind of known her for like years and years and years, but we just now like connected on like a deeper way because I was like, hey,
yeah,
like,
let's do this.
Let's go have coffee. Let's like talk. And there's just like how open people are to like, people just want to be like loved and seen and connected to. And I think when you can stop interpreting people's aloofness as disinterested or like not wanting, like
they're just protecting themselves because they're little kids
and it's
too
really
that want to be
easy to bust through that. What I've found is it pretty like,
I mean, the real realization is that the idea of like an adult is like not real. There are no like adults are like,
is that the title of this podcast?
Adults being an adult is an illusion.
Yeah, it is. It is.
We're all a bunch of grown ass kids with our like
kids with just big awkward bodies.
Yeah, and more responsibility. Yeah. And we're really just trying to like figure out life and be loved.
We want to feel loved and we want to feel like we have a place that we belong, you know? I mean, that is so true. Like I remember when I first had that big realization that my parents weren't perfect.
Yeah, that's a brutal one.
I was just like, fuck.
I think I'm going to be like telling my kids that from like a young age.
100%.
I'm a human.
I don't like from the time my kids could conceptualize language, I'm like, and the funny thing is, even though I've been doing that for my kids forever, they still say these things like, Mom, I feel like you know everything.
And you're like, no.
And I'm like, no. I know some things, but I don't know most things.
Yes. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's going to be a beautiful generational difference, I think. Because I think that's like our parents' generation was like they all felt like they had to know everything.
That they had to have the answers, that they had to explain like the origin of the universe. Like,
yeah, where you go when you die.
It's like stop.
Yeah.
Like, that's too much pressure.
Yeah, you're not like, you don't have to know everything. And definitely like don't need to pretend like you do. It's so, it's such a strange thing, really, when you think about it. But yeah, I think the thing here is like, I just would love to encourage everyone to try and reach out to that person in your like yoga class that you think is like cute. And you're like, I want to be your friend.
Yes.
Just be like, hey, you want to get coffee? Because anytime I have done that, and also like I've had friends in my life where I like tell them those stories and then they start doing it. I'm like, it's so cute. Everyone's like really just wants to be friends.
Yes.
And you can even do it online. I mean, like, that's what I found you online.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, let's be friends.
Hey, we would be friends.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. So you all got homework now.
Yeah. Reach out to that person or someone who crosses your path who has a beautiful energy and
see what happens. It might be your future like best friend forever.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. Oh, that was fun. Friendships are fun.
Yes. I love you.
I love you too. We're going to end every podcast with just like professing our love for each other.
I love you so much. It hurts me.
She says with like tears kind of in her eyes.
I have pain.
Yeah. Reach out to the person. It's so worth it.
Bye.